Spider-Man Far From Home is set to release on July 2nd, yet that hasn't stopped fans theorizing about what could happen in the sequel. But is there more going on than meets the eye? This video is based off an apparent leak of the whole movie, and while we won't spoil that here, we will have to talk about the after-credits scene of the film, so bear in mind that this video could be seen as spoilery if the leak is accurate. Spider-Man Far From Home deals with Peter Parker having to cope with the aftermath of Endgame, specifically the loss of Tony Stark.
Everywhere I go, I see his face.
Monuments to his legacy are springing up all over the city, a painful reminder that his mentor is no longer with him and that he'll have to continue to learn how to be Spider-Man without his father figure. That's why a school trip to Europe sounds pretty awesome to Peter. So the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man hops on a plane and heads over the Atlantic for some much-needed downtime away from the stress and reality that surrounds him in New York. But who are we kidding? Spider-Man isn't getting any downtime, especially when Nick Fury's involved.
So nice to finally meet you, Spider-Man.
You see, Fury needs Spider-Man's help with a little problem. Entities known as elementals have surfaced in Europe, and he's recruited Quentin Beck, also known as Mysterio, to battle these powerful beings. Interestingly, this Mysterio, played by Jake Gyllenhaal, is not from the primary MCU timeline. Instead, the decimation caused when Thanos snapped his fingers at the end of Infinity War essentially broke space and time. Like the film Into the Spider-Verse, the powerful snap opened up other dimensions to the source dimension. This allowed Earth 833's Mysterio to hop on over to Earth 616.
I'm sorry, you're saying there's a multiverse?
Kinda like how out-of-shape Peter Parker, Penny, Gwen, and Spider-Man Noir came to Miles' reality in the animated Spider-Verse. Only this time, no super collider is needed to open a rift in time. Whether this was a small tear that is now sealed or a giant gaping hole through time remains to be seen. But regardless of that, there is now a connection between at least one other reality in the primary timeline of the MCU. Of course, anyone who has read a Spider-Man comic or is familiar with any of his animated adventures will be able to tell you to not trust a man named Mysterio. He's a chief villain for Spider-Man and a member of the Sinister Six. Of course, opening up the Sinister Six conversation will bring back bad memories of the failed attempt to launch that supervillain team in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. But let's face it, fans still want to see such a team-up on the big screen. It just has to be done right. But bringing up the Sinister Six leads us straight into the core of this video's idea. The source of this apparent leak comes from Redditor Rohan RRRRR. That's 6 R's in case you were wondering. And being an internet leak, we should take this with a great big old piece of salt for the time being. The Redditor claims that his friend works in the visual effects department over at Marvel and has been involved with such films as Civil War, Guardians of the Galaxy 2, and now Far From Home. Naturally, Rohan's source is unnamed, so there's no real way to verify this, so again, salt. The source told the Redditor the entire plot of the movie, and for the sake of not ruining the entire movie for you, should this leak turn out to be accurate, we're not going to be summarizing it here, so you can go check out that on your own time, should you desire. But there is one element that we'd like to draw attention to, and talk about the possible implications it could have on the MCU in the upcoming phases. This element is actually the mid-credits scene, which is the first scene to play in typical Marvel movies once the movie has ended, and usually the one that bears more weight on the MCU as a whole. This scene rumored to jump straight to a dark room, and we get to see a sad, broken, and defeated Mysterio wallowing in his defeat. Yeah, apparently Mysterio is a villain after all. Didn't see that one coming at all, huh? Anyway, Mysterio is greeted by some familiar faces from the last Spider-Man film, including Vulture, sporting an upgraded costume, Chameleon, a character introduced in Far From Home, Shocker and Scorpion, played by Better Call Saul's Michael Mondo and apparently sporting a comic book accurate costume. They are met by a mysterious sixth person, decked out in an expensive suit, who offers the group a proposal. The scene is set to cut to a shot of New York City and the Avengers Tower. Only the Avengers moved out of that tower in Homecoming, and the name on the side of the building isn't Avengers, but rather Oscorp. Whether it turns out true or not, you must admit that's a pretty great after-credits scene, and it opens up the floodgates for the third Spider-Man film in the MCU. It also heavily implies that the man in the suit is none other than Norman Osborn, heralding the return of the Green Goblin to the big screen to fight Spider-Man.
Think about it, hero!
Who will play Norman this time around? Is it even Norman, or is it actually Harry? We don't have answers to that right now, but would love your input on which Osborn it should be, as well as the actor who shall be donning the green outfit yet again. Spider-Man fans have thankfully not been without Norman Osborn, at least not if they own a PS4.
It's Norman.
Osborn played a pivotal role in Marvel's Spider-Man on the PlayStation last year, and in that universe, he was the mayor of New York City who was hiding a terrible secret. He was also a rival to Dr. Octavius and the catalyst that caused the good Doctor to turn into his villainous counterpart. Perhaps the MCU's Norman Osborn will also be the mayor on the big screen, which is something movie fans are not familiar with, giving them a fresh new angle to work with in the MCU. But having the Goblin back opens up a ton of possibilities for storytelling on the big screen, stuff that we haven't seen before in the MCU or in Marvel movies in general. Willem Dafoe played a memorable Green Goblin in Sam Raimi's film, despite the bizarre costume, and has gone on to become the beloved villain thanks to his performance.
Imagine what we could accomplish together.
But while that story was certainly great, there is a slew of great Spidey and Goblin comic book arcs out there to adapt, including a reimagining of The Amazing Spider-Man volumes 39 and 40. This classic arc sees Peter Parker's secret identity exposed to the Goblin, who is simultaneously revealed to be his best friend's dad and is considered one of the best Goblin moments in the comic book canon. While this particular arc would have to be tweaked, we have to bear in mind that the Vulture knows exactly who Peter is, and can easily give that information up to the Goblin should he take the leadership position in the Sinister Six. The introduction of Mysterio from another dimension could also open the door to another important Spider-Man arc. If Mysterio is from Earth 833, then the idea that Miles Morales coming to the MCU is now a very distinct possibility. In the comics, he was in the Ultimate Timeline, which was known as Earth 1610, and was destroyed in the end. Miles was one of the lucky few to get transferred from the Ultimate Universe into the primary timeline. Could a live-action version of the character make his way on over to the MCU despite him being part of the Sony timeline thanks to Into the Spider-Verse? That's a conversation for Sony and Marvel to have. But if Miles were to come to the MCU, that opens up quite an interesting possibility for Sony and Marvel to play with, especially with Goblin possibly being added to the narrative. One of the most popular and memorable comic book arcs concerning the Goblin comes courtesy of Ultimate Spider-Man 156 to 160. These particular comics were written by the great Brian Michael Bendis, and those familiar with Marvel's publication will know where we're going with this one. In that particular run, the ultimate version of Peter Parker is ultimately killed by the Green Goblin himself. It was a pretty harrowing moment to see such a beloved character lose to one of his signature villains. Thankfully, this was in the Ultimate Universe and not the primary timeline. But it was still unbelievable nonetheless. Despite meeting his end, Spider-Man is able to come out as the hero and save a loved one, despite being horribly outmatched. The fight is deeply personal and builds on years of foundation between Goblin and Parker. With Spider-Man dead in the Ultimate Universe, the 616 Spider-Man became the sole primary Peter Parker in the comic world, while Miles was transferred to Earth 616 to continue living in a new alternate timeline thanks largely due to the popularity around the character. The death of Peter Parker has been something that was recently explored in Spider-Verse, and we're not too sure that Marvel Studios is willing to kill off Tom Holland just yet. But wouldn't it be awesome to see Parker train a live-action Miles Morales in the years to come? The possibilities are endless for the upcoming Marvel phases, which have been getting even more comic book accurate as the years have gone on. Into the Spider-Verse showed us that audiences can handle a plot as zany and out there as a multiple dimensions and various interpretations of the same character, while the last two Avengers films just assumed you've seen all of these Marvel films and didn't feel the need to play catch-up with its audience. The question now remains, is 6 villains too much for Spider-Man to handle? The Spidey films have suffered in the past by having too many villains on screen at the same time. Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 3 was panned by critics, and juggling Sandman, New Goblin, and Venom didn't help with the story's pacing and plot. Likewise, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 had Electro, Green Goblin, and Rhino. That's on top of a mysterious character hiding in the shadows seeking to form his own Sinister Six in the background. A gamble that failed to pay off for Sony, causing them to partner with Marvel Studios and reboot the character yet again. With 6 villains apparently set to come after Spider-Man in his upcoming films, one has to wonder if Marvel Studios is poised to repeat the same mistakes. Or have they found the cure for this dilemma? Will they spread out the villains over multiple movies, or reduce the other characters to more henchmen roles and put Goblin and Vulture in the foreground of the narrative? Another possibility is that the Sinister Six will be the main villainous group for the upcoming Avengers film, because as epic as Endgame was, you know the next 2 Avengers films will be smaller in scale to that spectacle. One thing's for certain though, if the leak turns out to be true and the after-credit scene plays out exactly as described, Marvel fans are in for one wild ride in Phase 4, 5, and 6. Could the Sinister Six be present over the course of multiple films? Are they the big bads of an entire phase? We'll have to wait for July 2nd to find out when Far From Home swings into theaters. If it is true, what would you like to see the Green Goblin do on the big screen this time around? Let us know what you think in the comments below, and be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more videos like it in your playlist every day. Thanks for watching.